Hello there, everyone. Time for another edition of Tracking the Tropics. Meteorologist Jim Dickey here in the ABC 7 Hurricane Center. It's Tuesday, September 4th, and we're tracking two named storms in the Atlantic, and a third that will likely be forming before long here. We, of course, have Gordon in the Gulf of Mexico, made a mess of our Labor Day here in southwest Florida yesterday, and primed for a landfall on the northern Gulf Coast later on this evening, if not early tomorrow morning. We also have Tropical Storm Florence in the central Atlantic. And again, a fresh wave coming off of the coast of Africa. Actually looks like it's starting to wrap up already as it makes its way offshore. It is early September. We're quickly approaching the historic peak of hurricane season. We're in the heart of the season now, so we expect to see multiple disturbances, if not named storms, out there at this point in the year. So let's begin with Gordon. This is the 8 a.m. advisory put out by the NHC, showing a 65-mile-per-hour hurricane. Those winds up slightly from last night. Held steady from 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. We're still seeing plenty of thunderstorm activity bubbling up around the center, but really since it was off the coast of Marco Island yesterday and it looked like it was trying to form that complete eye wall around its center, it's been struggling to get that true organization to sort of make the jump to a hurricane. Still, it's close. And it still has some time as it moves to the west-northwest going through the rest of the day to perhaps take on a little more organization. As we zoom in and get a closer look at that satellite picture, there was a blow-up of thunderstorms overnight, sort of died down a bit again, and now just in the past of the last couple loops of this frame, you're seeing the storms expanding, sort of exploding once again around the center. So it'll be a race to the finish, so to say. The official forecast as of the 8 a.m. advisory still shows a Category 1 hurricane, minimal hurricane, and then making landfall and quickly thereafter weakening right along the Mississippi-Louisiana border tonight, early tomorrow morning, and tracking further to the north and west from there. Regardless, winds likely not a huge issue with this storm. This is what our one in-house model, which did a great job predicting the winds with Gordon yesterday in southwest Florida. This is what it's showing for tonight. So winds sustained around 30 to 40 miles per hour. I think at times we see gusts, especially right at landfall there, right along coastal Mississippi, Gulfport, spots like Mobile, Pensacola, and those barrier islands. We could see those gusts pushing towards hurricane force. Perhaps we get a gust to 70, but I think we'll see the sustained winds likely staying in the realm of a tropical storm, more 35, 45, 50 miles per hour tops. The main issue, I think, from this storm, we'll see some storm surge thanks to the onshore winds to the east of the center. So Mobile through Pensacola, a little bit of storm surge there. I think they're going with 2 to 4 foot storm surge, the NHC is. There is a storm surge warning out. But I do think the main impact from this is going to be inland flooding from rainfall. I have a few spots plotted here. I don't want you to focus necessarily on exactly what the numbers are, the exact locations, but the overall potential. And I am seeing a pixel, in this case being near Pensacola, of 13 inches of rain. That's the kind of moisture we're working with. The dynamics coming together around the storm. We could see a wacky rainfall total, I think, as this moves its way onshore. About 4 to 8 inches of rain is likely on the eastern side of the storm. So for coastal Mississippi, coastal Alabama, and the western end of the Florida Panhandle and spots inland from there. But there could be a spot or two where some training, some banding sets up. You could get a rainfall total, 10, 12 inches of rain, and that is going to lead to some flooding. So that will likely cause some big issues there as we go through the night and we work through Wednesday. Elsewhere, here's Florence. It remains a tropical storm. You see it swirling there in the center of your screen. And then again, on the coast of Africa, there's a fresh wave moving its way off, seeing a little bit of turning with that. For the most part, it's just a complex of thunderstorms, a new African easterly wave that we're going to have to watch as we go through the next couple of days. So first things first, here's the 5 a.m. advisory on Florence. Again, put out on Tuesday. Winds 70 miles per hour, so just below that hurricane threshold. Looking fairly healthy. This has a much better structure to it than what I just showed you there with Gordon. You see the sort of concentric pattern. We're also seeing outflow going on aloft in a clockwise fashion. Signs that we have low pressure at the surface stacked right on top of that high pressure. So the air going in, down at the surface, and being vented out at the top of the storm. It's vertically stacked. It looks, again, fairly healthy at this point in time and on the verge of becoming a hurricane. What you could do at least briefly, but look at what lies ahead for Florence. This is the current wind shear, and this isn't going to die down all that much as it cuts a path through the west-northwest across it. The red, high wind shear. And again, I talked about the system right now being vertically stacked. That's what a tropical cyclone looks to do to be able to continue to strengthen and organize and reach that sort of peak hurricane strength. When you put shear into the picture, it becomes tilted, and it can expose the center and sort of tear that system apart. So it's going to run into that shear. In all likelihood, we're going to see some weakening. In fact, many models saying Florence could struggle to survive. You're looking at these different plots here, each line a different tropical model showing different intensity forecasts for Florence, and a good number of them show this diving down to a weak tropical storm over the next 72 hours. Now, eventually, it reemerges out of that shear. What will be left of it is yet to be seen. But if in some way, shape, or form that core holds together, which I think it probably will, it then has a chance to get out of that shear and to re-strengthen. See some models really ramping that up, but all of them keeping it a fairly minimal hurricane going forward. Now, you may have seen on social media the past couple of days a few model runs showing this coming close to the East Coast as we go into next week, so way down the road. First things first, when you look at model forecasts way out into the future, 180 hours, 200 plus hours, the errors in the model are starting to compound on each other, and you can't take much value from it, especially one individual operational model. Now, actually, I'm going to go back and run this through again. So this is right now. There's Florence in the central Atlantic. There is a big ridge of high pressure sitting on the East Coast. This is sort of a troubling pattern that we don't like to see during hurricane season because it sort of, so to say, opens up the East Coast to potential landfalls. Hence, we're seeing one later on today. But because you have your steering winds that cut across the Caribbean into the Gulf of Mexico, sort of working in a clockwise fashion, it just drags them right in there and, again, can open up the coast to a landfalling tropical system if it's in the vicinity at that time. Now, also some models earlier on were suggesting that this high works out into the northern Atlantic and sort of sets up that as Florence tries to work its way northward, it moves it back to the south and southwest and sort of blocks it from escaping. Watch what this does now. As I advance Florence forward, that ridge of high pressure, that yellow circle you see, sort of breaks apart and shunts further southward. So now we're talking a block setting up over the Caribbean. So that'll sort of force Florence to hit the brakes a bit. But also, we're no longer seeing in the upper level pattern, this is the GFS model, by the way, we're no longer seeing that blocking high setting up to keep Florence from reaching the blue area you see, and that's the jet stream. And if Florence does reach the jet stream, feels the pull of that, it'll be torn out to sea. And more models today, at least, are suggesting that out to sea path. It's something to watch. We're so far out, and it's tough to avoid that wide disparity in model forecasts when you get that far out in time. But this is the official forecast for the NHC, favoring a much more northerly path. By the time we get to Sunday, it has the center of the cone well off to the south and east of Bermuda. But again, when you talk about the cone, each side of it is the average forecast error at different periods of time, and one is well further to the south, the other even further out to sea. So we'll be watching it, again, a long time to keep an eye on this before it comes anywhere close to any land masses. As right now it's over the open Atlantic, and we'll see if it can even survive that higher wind shear. And lastly, before we close things out, let's talk about that new tropical wave. Again, it has just emerged off the coast of Africa. It'll fight off some shear over the next 48 or so hours, so with that, a low chance. But as it gets out of that shear, there is a pocket it's going to move into where the conditions are ripe for strengthening. With that in mind, the NHC says a 70% chance for development. The next name up would be Helene. I have to keep an eye on this one as well. It's taking a slightly southerly path to what Florence is doing right now. But again, I still see that shear out ahead of it that any system at this point in time is going to struggle to fight off. Lots of time to watch this too. So we'll be watching it. Not something to worry about just yet, but something to keep an eye on. Of course, it's September. Anyone living in an area that is prone to hurricane or tropical storm landfalls, this is definitely the time to be paying attention to the forecast each and every day. So, some takeaways. Gordon making landfall tonight, the northern Gulf Coast, right along the Mississippi-Louisiana border. Heavy rain going to be the main concern. Some spots could see upwards of 10 inches of rain by the time all is said and done, and that will lead to some flooding. Florence out in the open Atlantic going to hit some wind shear and weaken, but then re-strengthen. Some models try to bring it closer to the East Coast, something we'll be watching for, but the most likely scenario at this point in time keeps us out to sea and certainly well away from southwest Florida. We're also going to watch that wave off of Africa that is set to become Helene, but still a long way to go with that storm. So that will likely be it for me with tracking the tropics here this week, unless there's some other development. I will be back with a fresh look at what's going on across the Atlantic then next week. Until then, have a good one.